it's long ago. Did we stray? Were we wild and born free yesterday?
Hello everybody, it's Dana Gillespie here on the sofa at the Temple of Art and Music, the TAM. Now, we've had quite a few episodes of Globetrotting, and we had to go back through the vaults and looked at a recording that we had done earlier with a wonderful guest and realised that we hadn't used this recording because actually one angle had got lost somewhere. So I'd like to introduce you now to somebody who's one of my best friends, and I'm so happy he's my best friend because I can send him all sorts of really appalling things on WhatsApp, and I get them back as well. He's a hoot, and you know what is best about him? He loves music more than anything else, and anyone who loves music is A-OK by me. So please welcome and listen to the stories of Mr. Tris Penna. Hi, Tris. So nice to have you here on the hot seat.
I've always wondered what the inside of a bordello looked like, and now I know, Dana. I'm in your own little personal space.
And it's, as you know, it's very similar to my house, loads of pictures and hangings, and I've always loved to live in a sort of bordello. I've always lived like, even when I was 11, every place that I had always landed up being covered with drapes and incense and whatever. I was thinking, how did we first meet? Where did we first meet? When? I can't remember any of this.
I think it was about 5 years ago, was it, when I did that? 4 years ago?
Was this the BBC thing on Bowie?
That's right. I did a documentary on the song Life on Mars.
Right. Why was I there? Just because I was?
Because you were, I think. We came. Yeah. So I had an idea because I worked with Bowie in the 90s.
Yeah.
And got to know him the 80s actually, in the 90s, and got to know him quite well. And for me, I was always a fan of his music. I thought his music actually is one of the things about him that people don't talk about as much as they should do. They talk about the colour of the hair, the this, the lifestyle.
The image. Yeah.
But actually, he was an incredible composer and an incredible vocalist. So I thought I wanted to make a programme about his music, his songwriting. So I did a programme on Life on Mars and the origins of that. And that is where we first met, because via, I think maybe Vicky Wickham, or maybe even actually Andy Neal, who did a fabulous book on Ready, Steady, Go.
Which I've just been given a copy. Fantastic it is.
I think Andy introduced us and said that you'd have some interesting words to say. So I came to your bordello in South Kensington.
Yes. And of course Vicky Wickham was the sort of, she wasn't the top producer of Ready, Steady, Go. She was the sort of the one underneath. The top one was Elkin Allen. And Vicky never showed much interest in me, but Elkin Allen did all the talking to me, but he only ever talked to my tits. He never actually talked to me, but that's how he was. I don't know if he's still alive, but probably not.
I don't know, but Vicky's interesting because she was called the editor of the programme.
Yeah.
She's a very, very good friend of mine, and she actually booked everybody. So in a way, she now you would call her a producer. But
she
in those
was
days,
great, though. I mean,
I
saw her a few years ago. I don't know how come we sat and talked, and I really liked her because I didn't get a chance to talk to her much. And of course, she was very friendly with Dusty Springfield, which was the era that you know very well with Dusty, don't you?
Yes, that's where I met Vicky first, because I was working with the Pet Shop Boys and they did a track with Dusty, which incredibly gave her a #1 single on Cashbox charts in America. She never thought she was going to be successful again, and she so enjoyed that last stage of her career, which Neil and Chris gave to her. She absolutely loved it, and it was an incredible thing to give an artist that second bump, as it were, 20 or so years later, when she thought she was washed up.
It was all over, yeah. Well, we have another connection because, well, first of all, I have to thank you because you were the one that found the rare, undiscovered recordings of Bowie and me doing Andy Warhol, which was the song he wrote for me. And where did you find it? In a cupboard somewhere?
Well, years ago, I started to collect tapes. And so I would go to auctions and just buy reel-to-reel tapes.
Yeah.
And this is before people were really into Bowie and stuff. And I'd buy tapes or get hold of tapes. So I even got hold of some multi-tracks that somebody had in one of his record companies that were being thrown, believe it or not, thrown out. And so I've given copies of those all back to him when he was alive, and also to the record company now. But the stuff I collected then, and one of the things I had was a little tape, and it said Andy Warhol demo, and it was actually the first ever recording of it with you and You and him.
It was him on guitar, and I think it was Ronno on bass, Mick Ronson. But I'm a bit hazy about that era. I suppose we were all
I think it was clearly recorded pre that demo LP you did for Gem.
Which they called Bow Promo. Well, they didn't call it then. It didn't have a name. It was a white album, and they printed up, I don't know, 300 or 400 copies. And I think it's my handwriting on a lot of them. It just says Dana Gillespie and David Bowie. And then, and it was printed up. Bowie's got about 7 tracks on one side, and I've got 5 on the other.
That's right, yeah.
And I remember even then, going off to Los Angeles, Tony DeFries, our manager, of course, at the time, said, "Oh, you can go and see if you can get a record deal." And I went to places like A&M Records. They all said no to me. I mean, you know, and it's so depressing when you leave one of these meetings and you just come out thinking, "Oh, I've met another tosser," because the music was good, but I'm told that now the original albums will sell for about £5,000 because there are so few of them. And I've got one under my bed.
And the one I've got is the one that Warner's used to do the reissue because the tapes didn't exist and the artwork didn't exist, so they borrowed my original album.
So Tris gets a big thank you on the package thing that a label called Cherry Red put out, and the album is actually it's a double thing. It's called What Memories We Make, because of the fact that you found was it 2 versions?
No, just the one, and I found just the one, the original demo version, which must have been recorded, if we think about it, in early 71. Because I think you recorded the first studio version in the middle of 71 at Trident.
Yes.
And then the Weren't Born a Man version was different to the one on that promo album, he says, rather boringly.
Yeah, no, a lot of people like these facts. Yeah. And, of course, we have another connection, because from that Weren't Born a Man album, there were 2 songs I didn't write. Although, amazingly, I looked at the album yesterday. I'd always assumed that Mick Ronson produced it, and I looked at it. I produced it with Robin Cable.
Yeah.
And I'd forgotten that was my first taste of producing, which, of course, is something I love. But on that album, there's 2 songs I didn't write. One was Andy Warhol, and the other one was Stardom Road. And you got a little bit of a story about Stardom Road, haven't you?
It was one of my... I mean, I love the Weren't Born a Man album, but I'm also one of those strange people in music that dabbles in lots of... I say dabbles. I have passions in lots of different areas. So as well as being a broadcaster and a theatre producer, sometimes I'm a record producer quite often. And so...
And a few other things too.
A few other things, yeah.
And a massive record collector, a CD collector.
Yeah, I love music.
Yeah.
If you love music, and the great thing, if you love music, and it's always worth saying, if you love music, you'll like anybody else that loves music. It doesn't matter what their sex, colour, sexuality, politics are, you just get on.
Yeah.
And the most amazing thing about musicians, I think, is they always get on and respect other great musicians. Completely opposite to actors, who always stab each other in the back. But that's another
That's
story.
why I've never, ever really gone out with actors.
Yeah.
I mean, they'd be looking at themselves in a mirror. Give me a musician any time, at least it'll have more fun.
I think what an actor is they're a fabulous shell and nothing inside. What a musician is everything inside, and the shell sometimes ain't so hot, but...
So tell us about the connection
Stardom
of that
Road.
song.
So one of my best friends is a singer, Marc Almond.
We love Marc Almond.
He's an incredible singer, and for many years was sort of undervalued, but now has become a national treasure, which is amazing. But he had a pretty awful bike accident nearly 20 years ago now, almost died. And after the accident, he started to recoup. He had problems with his hearing and all sorts of things. And I said, well, why don't we do an album that tells the story of your life? And let's choose, because he wasn't up for writing then, because he was so fragile and frail and part of recovery. I said, well, why don't we tell your life story through other people's songs? And so we chose 12 or 13 or so songs to tell his life story. And one of the songs that I suggested that we record was Stardom Road, Part 1. But because it's all about becoming a star and the frailties and the difficulties of being a star, but rather than do the Third World War version, which they actually wrote the song.
Yeah, Jim Avery and I can't remember the other guy's name. Stamp and Avery was their names.
I was completely enamoured with your version and Del Newman's string
Del
arrangement.
Newman did great strings.
Yeah.
Of course, I'd actually wanted Paul Buckmaster because he was doing Elton stuff originally. I didn't even know who Del Newman was. Somebody suggested him. And then when I met him, what a lovely fellow, what great, lush strings. Nobody can afford those orchestras anymore. Who's going to pay for 20-string players?
And the choir as well.
Yes, oh God,
huge
it
choir.
was all in Trident.
So I said to Marc, we just got to basically do this version. A man has never done this version in this way. And so we copied Adele's arrangement, actually credited him as well. We didn't steal anything, because you have to credit people for that. And so that was really a good connection with you there.
Yeah, well, what I liked about the song is because I don't normally like to record other people's songs unless I wished I'd written it myself. And it had, I can't remember the exact, well, I wanted to remember the lines, but there's things like, there's managers, there's producers, and all the nerds, not nerds, but all something, they're all spaced out on speed, and they've all got sweet puffy eyes.
All the juices you need, was it?
Yeah, something like that. They were lyrics that girl singers didn't sing.
Yeah.
I felt I was being quite edgy at the time, but it was one of those albums that, because I'm on the front and my stockings and suspenders probably detracted a bit. But it's a good album. I'm happy with it.
I think, why that track worked, actually, is this. It's the same reason as why those Velvet Underground tracks work. So there's that, the arrangement is really sweet and maybe almost verging on the saccharine if you don't hear it in the right way, but the lyrics are acerbic. And it's that combination which I think is so powerful.
Well, I like
very seductive music and a lyric which goes in for the jugular.
Well, I like a good lyric, as you know. For me, I tune into the lyric first. I can't bear inane twat words that just are meaningless. But
that's why I've always rated Hal David, actually, as one of the most incredible things. But Bacharach, brilliant composer, obviously, but without the lyric. But without, hang on, I'll get the lyric wrong here for Alfie, but without true love, we just exist, Alfie, is one of those things, every time I hear it, it brings tears to my eyes. Without true love, we just exist. And that added to Bacharach's music just makes it work.
Well, it's when you have that combination of the two, that's when you start to make magic. And sometimes, though, you have somebody like Bowie who does the two together.
There's only a handful of those people. I think there's Dylan, obviously, there's Bowie. Those people that are the poets of their generation, I think, and they're also blessed with the musical talent, but without the lyric, it doesn't really cut it.
He was always a good lyricist. Mind you, I, of course, was around in the early days, from between 60, when I first met him was at 64, and then by 74 he'd moved to America. But the music that he did in that era, I loved the most, because I was around when it was being recorded.
I think the interesting thing about culture that's not of today is that culture in the past, more often than not, reflected the times we were in. Now, a lot of culture tries to make us act in a way they want the present to be. So it's a different thing. I think in those days, until recently, culture reflected how we all were, the foibles and all the rest of it. Now there's a sort of almost Soviet idealism in a lot of culture. We're projecting something that we think should be perfection, or it's weird, I think, that.
And also, don't forget, in production, everything goes through the machinery very differently. I mean, when I started, my first album was at 65, and it was on, I think, small. We had 8-track maximum.
4, I think.
4 maybe.
4-track,
in Decca Studios. You had a huge string orchestra, but who's going to pay for that? Nobody. Although I was lucky enough to be in that era when you had Jimmy Page, Led Zeppelin, and John Paul Jones, Led Zeppelin, just as session musicians. Big Jim Sullivan on guitar, Hug and Vickers, that was later Manfred Mann, playing instruments, and they were just session guys. How lucky we were. I'm so lucky to have been around in those days, and I learnt an awful lot from Mike Vernon, Blue Horizon, who I know that you know. And I mean, I had 4 decades, or an album in each decade, sitting next to him, really learning about record production, because most singers, especially women singers, because we're going to talk about production in a way, women producers, of which they are, can I say, as rare as rocking horse shit. They don't use, the girl singers used to sing, and then they go home or do whatever they did. But I always liked to sit in the studio and be there for, even if it was 25 hours a day, just learning and absorbing and seeing how they put things together and to see how things had changed. And then I was lucky in the 80s to record, no, it was 74, I can't remember anything, with a guy called Phil Brown. Did you ever read his book, Are We Still Rolling? One of the best books ever, Are We Still Rolling? He was the engineer at Island Studios. So I did,
Basing Street.
Yeah, Basing Street. And it was great. It was a totally decadent time. It was marvellous. And we were in the studios, and he wrote this great book with each chapter with everyone he'd worked with, which was, I don't know, Sly and the Family Stone, Bob Marley, Little Feat, Robert Palmer, and I get a chapter in there. And I've got by far the best and most outrageous chapter. But anyone that's interested in the old music business, they should read this book and the production. But again, I produced that with John Porter. We co-produced it together, and John Porter produced Buddy Guy with Damn Right I Got the Blues. But from that moment on, I knew that I liked to do things my way. And not that anyone else wanted to listen to it, but it's important.
Well, it's pretty much how I produce records as well, because although I had an early job as a trainee engineer in a studio, I fucked it up, excuse my language, but I cut the tapes in the wrong way and all the rest of it. And I then decided I can't do this, because in a way I found the idea of a desk and all the mechanics was almost an impediment to doing what I wanted to do, which in my head I had this vision of what I wanted the music to sound like or be. So latterly, that's the sort of production that I do. I don't sit behind a desk as an engineer. I just try and find the most brilliant engineer to work with, to do all that gubbins for me while my brain can...
Well, if you've got somebody that you can communicate with, I'm very lucky though. I work with a guy in Wolf Studios called Dominic Brett, and he's mixed me for about 40 years, certainly 40 albums, because I had 20 albums producing the Mustique Blues Festival, which was very different doing live stuff, because you've got to do kind of clonks and everything. But when you got somebody on your right, it really helps, because you have to trust them and know that they each one knows what the other person wants.
So during lockdown, you've recorded 2 albums, haven't you? One pretty much a live album, or during the last 12 months, a live album you recorded in Italy with your band,
the London Blues Band. I recorded with, co-written with Jake Seitz, who also plays guitar in the London Blues Band.
So you've recorded that almost live in a room in Italy, basically.
Not almost, it was live. I mean, it was the only time I've ever sat in my easy chair, sort of lolling, and everyone's just around playing. And but mixed back in England, because it's live, there's a lot of clonks and, twangs and weird things. So those bits were cleaned up, because I've got excellent ears, and I can't bear it if I hear something wrong years later. It bothers me. So I did that, and then I did another album with a guy who I've done about 12. I've forgotten how many albums I've done it with, Nick Hogarth, and he wasn't able to go out because of the lockdown. So again, I sat in the studios, and every day we'd do the mixing with Dominic and then send it to him, and he'd check out everything was all right. But I'm quite happy if I go weeks and weeks sitting in a studio. And my modus operandi has changed. When I look back at the Island studio sessions of the 70s and everything, it was such mad party times, and we just lived on... Well, I won't even tell you what we lived on, but we lived on everything that was probably a bit illegal, and then just eat a Kit Kat or something, and then just carry on. And now, as I'm older and theoretically wiser, I make a salad every day. I'm quite famous for making a proper lunch, and then we carry on working, Dominic and I. So it's how times have changed. I mean, now, and then there was the 2-inch tape, that's gone out the window. Now it's all on a screen.
Which actually I'm quite happy with, because anything that removes any of the sort of gubbins away from just the creativity is good. But so this other album you've done in the studio is a multi-layered studio creation. So how do you go about that, Dana, in your head when you do that?
Well, in Nick Hogarth's case, he gave me 18 months ago sort of bits of... He was doing a project on on a monk called Thomas Merton, who's dead, I think, in the 60s. And it had this trancey moods to it. And every time I kept thinking, I'm not sure if I can turn it into anything. And then suddenly ideas would come. So it kind of grew organically. It took a long time. It was a difficult breech birth, this one. But I'm really pleased with the outcome. In fact, it's got a special thing, this album. I'm not quite sure yet what's going to happen to it. The Ace Records, I mean, the one that with the London Blues Band is called Deep Pockets, and that's not a problem. That goes to Ace Records. I've been with them since 1980, and I love them dearly. So that's coming out, they'll be out end of June. But this one is a sort of special one. I'm holding back. I don't know what I'm going to do with it. I'm not in a hurry, but it'll water finds its own level, and hopefully this album will too. Plus, I've been doing the audio book for my memoirs. That was a bit of a nightmare. I was nearly banging my head, going, it's so difficult to do. I hadn't realised how tricky it is to speak words, your own words as well.
But as you're a musician and a singer, you would get all the cadences, and having been an actor on stage as well, actress on stage.
Actress, yes, don't call me an actor, I don't care. I hate all this actor and,
I do too, I didn't quite know what to say. Knowing you're so politically correct, you see.
I know, I love to be politically non-correct, because it doesn't make sense to me to be called I never liked being an actress that much, actually, because unless there's music to it, which was why I was able to do Jesus Christ Superstar, because I sang every night. But to be in a play every night, I'd be slashing my wrists within a minute.
Music, I think, is so important, though, because if you think of Ken Russell, you've been in one of his films, but Ken loved music almost as much as he loved film. Kubrick, the same thing. And
yes.
They cut the film to me. The films, their films, which are all masterpieces, all have that musical cadence, I think.
Well, and I did a film for Nick Rogue, which, of course, Bowie did, Man Who Fell to Earth, and he also liked music, but not the same way. Ken Russell was obsessed about music. He would hear the music first, and then the film was born. Because I remember sitting with Bowie, and I suppose it could have been 63, 64, and Ken Russell was at that time just putting out his black and white films,
the Elgar film,
Elgar, Delia. So I can't even remember what they were. But the moment we knew it was on, we'd sit and watch it because it was completely different.
Yeah.
It was very different stuff. So Tris, I'm really pleased that you can make it down to the Thames. It's a pretty amazing place, isn't it?
It's incredible.
It's not like your average venue. And I hope you'll be coming back.
I might dust off my records and come do a DJ set down here, I think.
Well, I think you should. Yeah. I mean, why not? There's going to be kind of DJ times there. You have to ask the boss man and see what he says. Well, I'd like to thank Tris Penna for sitting on the sofa and talking to me, because it's always a joy to talk to somebody who loves music as much as I do. And his knowledge about life in the music business, it's invaluable. So till next time, from me, Dana Gillespie, here on the sofa at the Temple of Art and Music, Globetrotting, of course, goodbye.
Up on a hot tin roof, is it true what they say at night? Oh, cats are brave. Up on a hot tin roof. Out on the prowl with a midnight owl. Out on the prowl with a midnight owl. Hot tin roof. Hot tin desire and keep it warm? Did we build up the fire? Did we ride the storm up on a hot tin roof? We used to play. Do you